reference to the Route 18 corridor, Carpenter, Ashland, Edgemont, Mallow areas. The city's municipal advisor, Davenport and Associates, has recommended that the city consider procuring some form of interim funding to address this issue at the current time. This approach takes into consideration the uncertainty of possible reimbursement of funds to the city from possibly VDM. It is not recommended that the city tap into its hard-earned unassigned fund balance, but rather we pursue short-term interim funding through a local regional commercial bank that provides the necessary flexibility for this project. Also, Davenport recommends that the city pursue a line of credit, which ideally would limit the cost of money to only those funds actually drawn down over the next several months. Once the city knows how much, if any, dollars are reimbursed from VDM or other sources, the city in Davenport can make a further recommendation to City Council to repay the balance of monies over a series of months or years. This decision does not need to occur until budget deliberations for fiscal year 2022. In the event that the city would not receive any acceptable to the city and/or Davenport interim funding proposals, Davenport and city staff will report back to council with an alternative strategy to this interim short-term funding. Based on project needs, changes since we last talked, including a temporary road and additional required work that became known as late as today when Ms. Onitis and city staff were in the field, we would like to request $3 million line of credit and not have to come back based on any possible unforeseen items underground. And please be assured, we're only going to spend what is needed though on this project, and will minimize everything possible with proper project management and oversight related to this. The rationale for this recommendation is, first, the COVID-19 impact on all local government budgets remains to be seen, as this will continue through this fiscal year, and we don't know how far beyond. Also, Davenport recommends the city maintain as large an unassigned fund balance as possible if there would be any necessary budget needs down the road. And also, a strong unassigned fund balance is critical to our financial profile if and when we would need to go to market related to this. Also, short-term interest rates are at or near 50-year lows, so it is a good borrowing environment at this time. And the proposed line of credit structure is flexible enough that the city, to ensure that the city would not issue any more long-term debt than which is absolutely necessary once all the key facts related to the project are available. They have had very preliminary discussions with bond counsel, very reputable firm that we've used before, and they've incorporated the concept of a public hearing by city council. While certain circumstances could render this requirement moot, we believe it is prudent that we provide the greatest flexibility in pursuing the line of credit by having a public hearing. There's a timeline for this. Tonight, this funding strategy is being introduced to City Council, and that's interim funding. Tomorrow, with your blessing, we would like to have Davenport develop an RFP for distribution to commercial banks, and then on Friday, they would distribute that RFP to local and regional banks. The week of July 20th through 27th, it would be necessary to issue notices of public hearings. Then on Friday, August the 7th, we would receive the RFP results and develop a written recommendation with the assistance of Davenport and provide that recommendation to City Council on August the 11th with a potential closing at the end of August. Any questions related to this?
What do you need from us to start the process tomorrow? Just a consensus?
Yes.
Okay. I think we need to get going with it. But now, go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry.
No, it's been years since you refinanced through Virginia Public School Association the loan that we had.
Right.
And up until that point, they had us in banks that charged a huge amount of interest, and I don't believe we paid hardly anything on the basic funds. So I'm just wondering, are you going to be in on a part of this so that we can see and make sure that the loan is not getting, or the line of credit is not being
Inflated?
Inflated, or or it's not going to be bought by another bank, etc., like it was. I think it started with Royal Bank of Canada first.
Right. No, we won't have any of those issues with this.
Okay.
And the plan will be, after there's some options on line of credit from banks, to provide that to you all for review and input prior to any effort to proceed. We're at a good point right now with some lead time, because with the contractor mobilization, the contract, Mr. Popovich has structured it and Mr. Bryant have worked that there's payment milestones. So we're not at a point where, contractor arrives on day one and we're paying them just to show up on day one. So we've got some time to figure out what will work best. Additionally, there was an email sent late this afternoon. VDEM is waiting to hear back some final feedback with Richmond with what may be needed to apply for some assistance programs, but they have provided some preliminary recommendations on issuing a retroactive local emergency to then help with the documentation process and those kinds of things. So there's quite a few parallel paths working all at once.
So approximately when will construction start?
So temporary road construction and mobilization is beginning tomorrow, especially, the mobilization of it. We have a right of entry agreement that's been signed. We're also working to do a liability or hold harmless agreement that Mr. Popovich received today for the land that we'll be using. Essentially, that just means we'll restore the land to its natural state. That was necessary in talking with all the contractors, Mr. Steele from CHA, as well as VDOT, and the concern with the lane environment, and if we had kept an entire lane open of the actual road, the project approach would have had to have changed, and that would have increased the cost on that end. So we stuck with the original project approach, and we will be working on a temporary access gravel route for commercial traffic. So that will begin, and then the actual contractor that will do the slope work for, kind of anchoring Mother Nature back into her place, they'll be here on Monday the 20th.
Thank you.
But just to reiterate, BB, if we go after a $3 million line of credit, don't mean we're going to spend $3 million.
That's correct. That's.
But I mean,
Sure.
That's the first thing people are going to say. Oh my God, we're getting $3 million.
Sure. That's the purpose of the interim and a line of credit. We're only going to use, because if we went into a permanent borrowing situation, we're going to have to know exactly what it's going to cost, and at this point that's impossible.
Right.
So you would be possibly borrowing more money than you would necessarily need. Mm-hmm. With this opportunity, we spend what we need, and then we come up with a permanent solution based on the actual cost.
Even with what was found today in Mallow, we're pretty confident that this is going to cover it. Because the last thing you want to do is go back to the bank afterwards and say, hey, I need some more money.
That's why we raised it to this amount, to not keep coming back or have to do that type of thing.
Now it is Carpenter Drive,
We're bumping it.
Mallow, and the place on Edgemont as well?
Plans for now.
Just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. Okay.
And this would cover all 4 locations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's Mallow Road, Edgemont Drive, Carpenter, and Ashland. Carpenter and Ashland are almost
Yes.
one at one.
They
Yeah.
are one. We did flat out ask today if we were to kind of do nothing with Ashland, what that would mean. The recommendations were pretty clear from Mr. Steele as well as GSI, which is the company that does the slope repairs, that all that would do is continue to then pull on the area that you repaired, kind of, just force of gravity. It would then continue to fall and potentially risk failure of the area on Carpenter that would get repaired. So, there is the need to proceed with both of those areas. I know at last meeting that was a question of would that be feasible or not. So that's one thing that we needed to address. And then today during site visits with having our pre-construction meeting with all the companies that we'll be working with, there was a landslide that we were made aware of on Mallow, which is very close to where the slope destabilization is starting. So these repairs are becoming critical, and the longer we delay, it will continue to increase costs. So with that being said, we determined that even though this is emergency work, wanting to try to do proper project management, having enough buffer, because it's a good idea to always have a contingency, or you don't know what you may see when you start digging, building back in some padding with the project budget. Not to say that you would spend it all, but as we had discussed last week, just for Ashland and Carpenter, for the soil work itself, to anchor everything back in, that itself was $1 million.
Well, now looking at, and this may be a dumb question, and I may be getting ahead of myself here, but looking at Ashland and Mallow, those 2 causes over a long period of time being drainage. Will we be able to take care of drainage issues to make sure that in another 20 years
Yes.
that this doesn't happen again?
The drainage solutions are being incorporated into the project. That is in the scope. Mr. Popovich saw their proposal document. I was the attorney working on it. It's a FOIA document, but yes, that was covered in there as a permanent solution.
I got to thinking about that when you were telling me the one in Mallow.
Yes.
With the drainage pipe and all that, and it
Yes.
took a while, and I thought, well, if we don't take care of that, then in another several 20 years or whatever, we're going to be looking at doing, whoever's up here is going to be having to do that again.
Yes. And there is a good warranty period on the work that they do. We were told it's 7 years, so it's not your traditional 1 year from closeout. So we can, actively monitor it very aggressively for 7 years to then see if there's anything that changes.
I'm good with getting this started. I mean, we got to do something.
I think this needs to move pretty quickly.
And I like the idea of the line of credit. In my limited mind of numbers, I think maybe, don't you think this is a better way to do it?
It's your
going
best.
out for a $3 million bond.
Otherwise, you've got to go out for a loan that you don't know what the cost is going to be. Yes.